Rule number 1. He will begin in the furthest corner of your basement. If you see him, do not overreact. He may decide to move on. I woke to the sound of rain. Rain tapping against the bedroom window, trailing downward, a pointless race to the bottom, large drops consuming the smaller. I sat up and stared at the shut closet doors. I sighed, still exhausted. The horrific sounds of last night echoing in my head. Zach's whimpering screams for help. Reaching for my crutches, I stopped short. Water. A small puddle on the windowsill. I pushed up to standing and crouched over. Water dripped off the windowsill and onto the floor. I wiped my hand against it. Cloudy white droplets clung to my fingertips. I ran another hand along the edges of the window seam until it caught a snag. More water. The windowsill was broken. Yet another expense I didn't have the money for. Great. Wiping my hand off on my shirt, I turned back around when another memory entered my head. The dripping sound in the basement. The puddle of water and clumps of wet dirt in the basement corner. What exactly was that about? I grabbed my other crutch and went downstairs. I didn't know for sure, but I had a theory. Howie's green backpack sat in the middle of the living room floor. "Howie?" I said. No response. I shrugged and moved into the kitchen. Maybe he went out for the day. Either way, my curiosity was getting the better of me once again. The basement was inviting me down. One last time. I stood there thinking about puddles and coat racks, ruminating. I never specifically mentioned the coat rack to Paul. Sure, there's a chance he could have overheard me talking with Mitch, but that seemed unlikely. Maybe he really was possessed by the man in the basement. Maybe I really am completely insane. Maybe I'm trapped in a madness triggered by Mitch's note and a misplaced coat rack. But that almost seemed crazier than the actual situation. Regardless, I needed to investigate the basement. One last time. Easier said than done. I couldn't go through the main door thanks to the barricade and the intruder standing there. But thankfully, one of the spare rooms had a window. A small window and a cramped window well. But a window nonetheless. Hopefully the few extra quarantine pounds wouldn't prevent me from squeezing through. Hopefully. I brought my trusty switchblade and a pencil-sized high-powered flashlight. I'd be going in dark because the light switch was on the stairs and, as I mentioned before, so was the intruder. No way was I going anywhere near him. Sure, I wasn't thrilled at the prospect of going back down at all, but according to the rules, the intruder wouldn't hurt me. Not yet. I crouched down into the gravel window well. Moving around with one leg was getting a little easier, but I still needed crutches. Through the window, I slid my crutches in first, and they clattered to the floor, a little louder than I'd have liked. I waited, listening for a reaction. Nothing. Feet first, I pulled myself through and stepped down into the room. A room no bigger than a walk-in closet crowded with unopened boxes. Why did I have so much stuff? Squatting down, I picked up my crutches. It's not real, I told myself once again, flicking the flashlight on, and no light. Are you fucking kidding me? I literally changed the batteries 5 minutes ago. I shook the light. Nothing. I smacked it with the palm of my hand, and finally, it flickered to life. Thank fuck. I was starting to feel like a Silent Hill video game character, clunky walking controls included. Lovely. Flashlight between my teeth, I crutched across the room deeper into the basement. My hand gripped around the doorknob and I froze. The stupidity of me being down here again suddenly hit me. Was this really such a good idea? I glanced back at the open window. Inviting sunlight cast into the room. The peaceful sound of rain patting against gravel. Fuck it. I turned back for the door. I still don't know why, but something told me the water in the basement corner would answer many questions. Maybe everything. Filled with bitter resolve, I clenched my fist around the doorknob, turned it, and gently pushed open the door with my knee. Okay. I stepped out into the hallway. It was quiet down here. Unnaturally quiet. Like the world behind me suddenly vanished into non-existence. Like the basement itself was now the entire universe. I turned leftward, the light between my teeth cast into the distant stairwell corner. Empty. Thank God. I turned rightward. The cold concrete rec room greeted me. Uninviting as always. Even before all this, the rec room creeped me out. There was something about hallways which led to rooms with blind corners on either side. Anything could be hiding there, waiting to jump out at you as you stepped in. The random stacks of cardboard boxes didn't help either. I crutched forward. Shadows on the rec room's back wall lurched up and down with each forward step. My eyes darted back and forth, searching for any possible movement, any sign of the intruder. I stepped into the rec room and swivel-checked the corners. Nothing. Everything motionless. So still it almost felt like the room was on pause. A thin layer of dust covered all. I crutched forward again and, my cast-covered leg bumped into a stack of precarious boxes. A stack of boxes which collapsed into another stack of boxes and then another one. Stupid fucking idiot. The tumbling crash of random objects slamming into the concrete floor. Fool of a took. I tensed up, bracing for the noise to end. Finally, the domino cacophony stopped. Silence returned. I looked back over my shoulder, casting light into the stairwell corner. Still empty. Good. I half expected something terrible to be stood there. Something incomprehensibly monstrous. I waited with held breath, waited for the intruder to stagger down the steps, but nothing happened. Not even the sound of breathing. Not even the smell of burnt hair. Okay. I turned around and crept toward the back corner. I squatted down and studied. It was the same corner where the water had dripped a few nights back. Dry now. I looked up. Pink insulation and pipes. Maybe it really was just a leak. Maybe I came all the way back down here for nothing. I was about to stand back up when something caught my eye. Dust, or rather, a lack of dust. A perfectly dustless square in the corner of the concrete wall, about 3 feet by 3 feet. I leaned in close and squinted. There was a hair-thin line in the concrete, a crack only visible from the perfect angle. A thin line forming the shape of a square, like someone had cut into the concrete with a laser. Almost reflexively, I placed my hand against the dustless square and pushed. The panel shifted backward with a satisfying click. Then it shifted forward and slid to the side, revealing an entrance. An entrance barely big enough to crawl through. I looked back over my shoulder, shining the flashlight at the door of the rec room. Still nothing. I turned around and crouched down further. The entrance led to a tunnel, a long straight tunnel with dirt walls, dirt floors, and strained beams holding it all together. Unsafe, to put it mildly. It went down about 20 feet and then took a hard turn to the right. A hard turn directly toward Paul's house. A tunnel connecting our basements. I barely even registered what I was seeing when the basement light flicked on. My eyes flinched shut as they reacted to the sudden light. I spun around, eyes opened. Still nothing but time to leave. I pushed up to standing and crutched back toward the hallway. The basement light flicked off again. Darkness. Fuck this. I picked up speed, hauled down the hallway, shoulder pushed back into the spare room, slammed the door shut, and locked it. Taking a deep breath, I stepped away from the door, spun around, and shoved my crutches through the open window. Hoisting myself through, I scrambled out of the window well. I crawled away and lay on my back on the wet lawn. Freedom. Catching my breath, I stared up at gray skies, rain dotting against my face. Suddenly, my phone buzzed to life. I pulled it out. One missed call. Unknown number. Voicemail. One message. I tapped into voicemail and held it up to my ear. Hey, Brandon. It's Paul. I'd like to set some things straight. Call me back when you get a chance. I haven't been fully transparent with you. No shit. Throughout all of this, I kept thinking of my childhood friend, Zach. They never found his body. The only thing they found was a green bicycle, mangled, twisted, and stained with blood and guts. Hit and run, according to police. Likely a semi-truck that didn't even know at first. Some driver driving for miles oblivious to the mess of gore stuck to the front of his truck. Drove all the way to the next brake stop. It's more common than you'd think. The driver probably got spooked, cleaned the gore off his truck, lied to himself, said it was a deer or something, and... well, that's that. I never bought it. Back when I still cared, I was convinced something else was at play, something incomprehensibly terrible, but considering the lack of evidence, it was the most likely explanation. At least, that's what they told me. It took me over 10 years to finally accept the given explanation. That was the first step to moving on. After that, I finally stopped thinking about Zach every day. Sometimes I didn't think about him for weeks, even months. Hell, up until the intruder's mocking theatrics, I hadn't thought about Zach for years. Anything to get a good night's sleep. But now, memories of Zach played through my head like half-remembered dreams, like the time he jumped from the second-story bedroom onto the trampoline and his mom screamed at us from the living room. The time we stayed up all night playing Super Mario Bros. And when my dog died and Zach came over and didn't say anything, didn't try to make me feel better, he just sat with me, and that was all that I needed. I didn't have a real friend before Zach. I haven't had one since. I agreed to meet with Paul in a public park. My plan was simple. Let him do all the talking. Hopefully learn something along the way. At this point, it didn't make much sense to confront Paul on anything. I'd only bring up the coat rack if needed. I still didn't even know if Paul was Paul. But that didn't matter. Right now. Gray skies above. Paul sat on a park bench overlooking a duck-filled pond. Reddish-orange autumn leaves carpeted over muddy grass. I approached from behind. Paul. He looked back over his shoulder, breathing fog. Let's go for a walk, kid. We trudged down the path, boots crunching against the gravel. You know I struggled with drinking, right? Said Paul. I nodded. I told you the first time I saw the intruder was in the basement, yeah? Well, that wasn't entirely accurate. I did see him once before that, way back in 81. Holly and I, not married yet, we were camping out in Utah, La Salle Mountains. He stopped talking and looked around as if to make sure nobody else was too close. Satisfied, he continued. So there's this area, not far from the main campsite. Bunch of caves. Not caves like tunnels or whatever you're thinking, more like a pile of giant boulders overgrown with trees and moss, and tiny spaces between the boulders. Crevices, some of them big enough to crawl through, yellow signs up, no climbing, that sort of thing. Paul suddenly stopped talking. Up ahead on the gravel path, a tall man with a scarf wrapped around his lower face strode toward us. He was heading straight for Paul, vaguely familiar. His boots crunched against the gravel, faster and faster until he strode right past us, as if we weren't even there. Paul looked back over his shoulder, waiting for a safe distance before continuing. So, we're out there. Out by these caves, and I was drinking. Way more than I should have been. And Holly, we're jumping from boulder to boulder, having fun, you know. But some of those rocks must have been over 40 feet tall. So we reached this one crevice, a bit wider than the rest. A sheer drop, about 20 feet down, getting thinner and thinner right up to a slit of darkness below. Holly jumps it first, no problem. I jump it next, and my foot slips. He stopped talking for a moment, thinking back, remembering. Part of me wanted to cut him off, burst into accusations, but another part just wanted to know what happened. He trudged onward. So I tumbled over backward, head first into this crevice. My skull slams against the wall, and I black out. Come to about 20, maybe 30 seconds after, and I can barely breathe. My body's wedged between these boulders, my chest squeezed down on either side, my neck twisted and viced between the walls. I was stuck, upside down and looking straight into the darkness below me. He stopped walking again, and his eyes drifted toward a nearby bench. Do you mind if I sit? I didn't respond. Paul strolled over and slumped down onto the bench. Staring out over the pond, his cold blue eyes snapped back and forth over the water. I squatted down on the path in front of him, resting my elbows on my knees. A shimmering breeze crept over the pond, and a wet leaf stuck to the back of my head. I pulled it out and tossed it back into the wind. So I'm stuck, he continued. Upside down, head first, wedged between these two giant boulders, blood rushing, ears ringing out, gasping in little sips of air as my vision blurs in and out. Holly's above, screaming down, asking if I'm okay, but I can't answer her, you see. I can barely breathe. I try speaking, and only muffled whimpers escape. You ever had a nightmare where you scream for help, but your voice just falls right back into your throat? Again, I didn't respond. So Holly, she can see my feet twitching down there. She knows I'm still alive, and she yells down, she's gonna get help, tells me to try and stay awake. This was pre-cell phones, mind you, though I doubt there'd been service out there anyway. He sniffed a little and wiped his nose with the back of his sleeve. So now, I'm stuck out there, completely alone. Sun's still out, but it's getting dark. I'm in the shadows anyway. I can't really describe that kind of fear, being stuck like that. He looked away. I'm doing everything I can to stay calm, trying to focus on what little breath I have. You see, there's this thing I learned back in Alcoholics Anonymous called 4x3. Helps you calm down. Name 3 things you can see, hear, feel, smell. So, I start making notes of my surroundings. Green moss, gray rocks, shadowy crevice. He paused again, and then he looked directly at me. And that's when I see him. Or at least, the faintest outline. My eyes were still adjusting, but down below, about 10 feet away, someone was there. He went silent, his pupils dilating, as if he was back in the dark. At first I thought, it was a shape in the rocks, maybe optical illusion, you know. All I could see was the faint shape of this body, and the glint of what might be eyes. So maybe it was nothing, but as my vision adjusted, the whole picture came into view. Still dark, still covered in shadow, but unmistakable now. A man. His body contorted and twisted, wedged between the crevice. Motionless. So fucking still. Almost stiller than the rocks, like a circus contortionist hiding down there. Waiting for me. Paul shook his head like a chill went down his spine. His face was filled with absolutely nothing. Gold eyes, dead eyes. Like shark's eyes. Again, Paul looked straight at me. Maybe it's a body, I thought. Trying to make sense of it. Maybe somebody fell down there before me? Not much of a comfort, but better than somebody hiding there. But then, Paul cleared his throat. His face was changing so slow it was almost imperceptible to the eye, like the sun moving. You can't see it actually move, but next thing you know, it's over there, his blank face shifting to a portrait of pure terror. He was mirroring my pure emotion. My heart beat faster, thumping against the rock with every pump, my vision fading as all the blood in my body drained downward until I was about to pass out. Hell, I welcomed it. And then everything went dark. Paul grimaced regretfully. When I came to, I wasn't stuck between the rocks anymore. I was biking. Green bicycle. Riding a green bike down the side of a highway at night. And I wasn't myself. I was somebody else. He paused and looked over at me. I tried to maintain a neutral expression, but it was hard considering how crazy his story was getting. Yes, it's crazy, I know. But I was trapped there behind somebody else's face like it was a mask. I could even feel their thoughts, their memories. And then everything went dark again, and I appeared behind the eyes of somebody else now. Some guy wandering around a shopping mall at night. Some washed-up stranger filled with bitter self-hatred. I can still feel his sadness sometimes, his regret, and then darkness. It kept happening again and again, a clusterfuck of random visions seemingly connected, but always looking out through other people's eyes. I saw things, some familiar, most strangers, past, present, future, incomprehensible contradictions. Could have been 5 minutes, but it felt like eternity. Like I lived multiple lifetimes. Like this was always my existence and always would be. It's hard to explain how terrifying that can be. Maybe it's because it doesn't make any sense. Paul rubbed his jaw, thinking. Everything before, my life with Holly, fishing on a summer weekend, playing with my kids, it was nothing anymore. It was nothing but a thin sheet that might be ripped away at any second. Paul shifted his weight. I can't explain why. But that strange message, it was so clear. Like my entire life had been a dream, and I'd just woken up in the real world. A world where I didn't exist. There wasn't a shred of doubt in my mind. He paused for a moment, and then I woke up in an ambulance. Back in my own head. Hysterical. Screaming and wailing about the man tucked between the rocks like a spider, ranting and raving about visions Holly and the paramedics were doing everything they could to keep me calm, keep me from hurting myself, but finally they had to sedate me. I dozed off until the hospital. Concussion. Minor cuts. Bruising. All that for that. Doctor told me it was common for concussed people to hallucinate, especially considering the lack of oxygen and me being upside down for such a long time. Told me about a fellow who almost drowned once and thought he saw the Easter Bunny in the water. I've always been scientifically minded. It made sense to me, brain plays weird tricks. Hallucination made more sense than some circus contortionist sneaking down to the rocks to fuck with me, and visions of other worlds, other people. Paul sighed, leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. He looked at me as if that was all he had left to say. I was about to speak when... I'm guessing you found the tunnel. I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. Paul nodded, pushed up from the bench, and walked down the path. I followed. I meant to tell you about that. He smiled grimly. So after I tried shooting him, all those years back, he rubbed the knuckle stub where his pinky finger used to be. Things got bad. Really bad. Fucker started taking steps forward every other day, sometimes every single day. Tried a lot of things to slow him down, but the only things that worked were the maze and the bunker door. Had some friends from the army help me with that. Told them I was building a doomsday bunker. He shook his head. I was a medic in the war. Did I ever tell you that? Again, I didn't respond. I was doing everything in my power to stay calm. Of course, Holly and I were already on thin ice, and then I shot my own finger off. He smirked. Building an apocalypse maze bunker was the cherry on top. She took the kids and left, which honestly was fine by me. I didn't want my family around the intruder anyway. Or around me, for that matter. I was still painfully aware of the fact that I might just be completely fucking insane. He stopped walking for a moment, looking around again, and then continued. But her leaving... See, that really kicked me into gear. I forced myself to stop drinking. I started getting help, professional help, started taking meds, the right meds, and sure enough, things actually got better. The bunker door seemed to be keeping the intruder at bay. Sure, he was loud as hell, banging on it every night, but I wore earplugs, blasted white noise, and that was good enough. Weirdly, I was almost at peace with his being there. Paul sighed, breathing out fog as we walked along the path. Then one night, maybe 6-7 months after Holly left, I wake up. And it's quiet. Actually, quiet. No banging on the door. No screaming and howling from the basement. Just nothing. The silence filled me with more fear than anything else I'd felt. It terrified me. For a few reasons. First, it made me wonder, what was he up to? And second, I'd gotten so used to the sound that I couldn't even sleep without it. In a twisted way, the intruder had given me a purpose, something to reckon with, and now he was gone. Paul looked up at the gray autumn skies, squinting as diffuse sunlight cast against his face. So a few weeks have nothing go by, and then On a Sunday afternoon, Holly calls me up out of nowhere. I guess she heard through the grapevine that I was doing better, getting help. She asked me how I was doing, asked me if I wanted to get coffee, maybe see a movie. Can you believe that? Just like how we met. She asked me out. Back in those days? Smiling, Paul shook his head. I said that'd be nice, said next Tuesday'd be all right. Paul went silent as if considering his next words carefully. And then I set the phone down and turned around. And there, in the middle of the living room floor, a bottle of cognac. He scoffed, unopened. Paul rubbed his forehead with the back of his thumb. I was sober for over half a year at that point, but I drank it all. He glanced over at me, catching the judgment in my eyes. He looked back down the path. I drank it because it was there. He shrugged. And then I get the brilliant idea to go check on the intruder. You know, see what he's been up to. I'd only ever tried to kill him once, and that backfired, Paul chuckled. But my shit-faced brain got some ideas in it, and I, drunk as hell, staggered downstairs, lurched open the bunker door, and tumbled inside. But there's nothing down there. No stack of boxes, no circus contortionist. Nothing. So I stagger further down through the maze all the way to the back corner, and there it is. A tunnel dug into the basement corner, barely big enough to crawl through. At first I assumed he was setting to wrap back around into my house, so I lost my mind. I scrambled back upstairs, planning to come back down with the 9mm again and try God knows what. Paul started walking faster now. And then I go upstairs and there he is, standing in the center of the living room, right where the bottle of cognac was, covering his face with his hands like a kid trying to hide. And that's when I noticed it. On his left hand, the fifth finger cut off short at the first knuckle. Paul held up his own hand. Everything suddenly clicked. He snapped his fingers with surprising loudness. I didn't know why, and I still don't know why, but he's connected to me. And in my head, the only way to stop it was to... He trailed off into somber silence. Still drunk as fuck and not thinking straight, I get into my old pickup truck and peel off down the hill up the number 7 and drive. I drive past Old House up through Merchant and keep going, and I know exactly where I was headed. Pedal to the floor the whole way there, finally feeling like everything made sense, like every single little thing in my entire life was building toward this. Paul went quiet as a family of 4 strolled past. So I keep driving, he continued, faster and faster up toward the Balry Cliffs, whipping round every corner like a high-speed chase until I screeched to a stop, nearly slammed my face against the steering wheel. High beams casting over a long stretch of empty road, everything pointing toward the Balry Point lookout. He stopped walking and stared straight ahead, as if he was back in the truck, looking back down a long stretch of road. I shifted back into gear, slammed my foot into the pedal, and the tires spun out against the pavement a few seconds before they caught, and the truck lurched forward, hauling faster now, straight toward the cliff's edge. City lights below, casting up into the night above. I shut my eyes. Any second now, I'd be sailing through the air, and... Again, he snapped his fingers. Everything crumbled into a crashing stop. My head snapped forward and smothered into latex airbag. The stench of plastic and booze and gasoline. He paused for a moment, eyes flicking back and forth across the path ahead. Turns out the city installed stopping posts on the cliff's edge. Guess I wasn't the first to try, said Paul. Front bumper falling off, I drove all the way back home. It was nearly bright out by the time I got there, and the intruder was gone. Paul started walking again. I latched up the bunker door, and I didn't go back down for years. The whole time expecting any day now, he'd come pushing up through the floor. But it never happened. Paul shrugged. Look, I know it's a lot of talking, but all this to say, I can help you pass this off to somebody else. I shook my head, tired of the games, tired of the workarounds. The same way you passed this off to me. I mean, it wasn't intentional. Trust me. But yes. More or less. He might still be coming for me, though. I don't know. None of this is a guarantee. Look, you don't need to decide right away. How far along is he? Top of the stairs, but still in the basement. Yes. Do you have a guest over? Yes. Make sure they stay away from him. Have you barricaded the door? Yes. Good. Take some time to think about it. Even if he gets out of the basement, there are other ways to pass him off, more impersonal ways. Also, don't be freaked out if you see him upstairs. Even with the door barricaded, he can do that. But he'll always set back to where he left off. All of Paul's meandering still didn't explain his inexplicable knowledge of the coat rack. I almost brought it up, but I stopped short. Maybe Mitch was right. Maybe the intruder really did get to Paul. Maybe Paul wasn't even aware. Part of me wanted to take up Paul's offer. Part of me wanted to bunker barricade the basement door and pass off my problems to somebody else. Move away, pretend none of this ever happened. But I didn't. I wish I could say it was out of some bedrock moral principle, but mainly I refused Paul because I didn't trust Paul. I doubt Paul even trusted Paul. So far, I was adding pieces to an ever-evolving clusterfuck of a jigsaw puzzle. The more I learned, the less sense everything made. Part of me wondered if that was the point. If the chaos and confusion were part of the game. Maybe the intruder thought it was funny. Still, the main question remained. Is there a way to stop the intruder without passing it off to somebody else? My car rattled as it droned down the number 7 highway. I was on my way back home from the meeting with Paul, and it was already dark out. I needed to get home and sleep. And then, a strange feeling came over me. A pressure in my forehead. Not quite painful, but incredibly uncomfortable. Not a migraine either. It felt like a thin sheet of something suddenly appeared behind the skin of my forehead, pressing against my skull. I could almost feel my face pulling tighter. I rubbed my forehead with the back of my arm, and something big darted out onto the road in front of me. My foot slammed on the brakes, and my car swerved into a screeching drift. Everything outside blurred into a hazy streak, and came to a crashing stop. My car slammed into a roadside barrier post. My head whiplashed sideways and cracked against the window. I blacked out and came to only seconds later. My headlights cast into an open field across the road. In the distance, a brown bear scrambled off into the dark. That's what I had almost hit. I moved my arm to feel the side of my head. I moved my arm. I couldn't move. I tried turning my head. Nothing. I tried breathing. Nothing. I tried moving my eyes, and with great effort, I glanced to the left and then the right. "I know you're here," a strange but familiar voice echoed in the car. "You fucker." Concussion, I told myself. I hit my head, and these are just the symptoms. I couldn't smell anything either, or hear anything, other than the voice. I forced my eyes down to the steering wheel. It wasn't my steering wheel, and these weren't my hands gripped around it. This wasn't my body. I was trapped behind somebody else's. A silent passenger like that Malkovich movie. It felt like I was wearing somebody else's face like a mask. All the while, my senses fading in. Sound first. The sound of torrential rain beating down against the windshield. Howling wind as it gusted through midnight fields, and then the sound of breathing. Not my own breathing. The breathing of whoever I was trapped inside. Smell faded in next. Whiskey and vanilla-flavored smoke. One of the hands reached up and adjusted the rearview mirror. Cold blue eyes stared back at me. It was Paul. He looked younger, early 40s maybe. "Welcome back," he said, slurring his words, staring at himself through dilated pupils. He was talking directly to me. Paul coughed and rubbed his forehead with the back of his thumb. Pressure squeezed against me like a crushing vice. He smacked his forehead with the back of his hand, and a jolt of pain shot through me. He hit himself again, and again, and again, each impact more painful than the last, until finally, he stopped. Paul adjusted the mirror, shifted back into drive, and pulled onto the road. Frantic window wipers struggled to keep the rain at bay. I could feel everything now. The rumble of the highway, the taste of booze and tobacco, even blood. I was paralyzed. With what little control I had, I forced Paul's vision downward. He tapped the brakes and swerved into the opposite lane, then swerved back. Don't fucking do that," he mumbled. And then another voice entered. "Just keep driving. You're almost done." It was Paul's voice, but different this time. Not slurred. "Keep fucking driving. You're almost there." I was hearing his thoughts. Maybe hearing wasn't the right word. I was feeling them, almost as if they were my own. But they stuttered in and out like a bad radio signal. Up ahead, on the side of the road, something bright green. A bright green bike. I forced Paul's eyes to look, and he swerved. The car slipped into a tailspin and sideswiped into something. 2 sickening thumps, and the car slammed bumper first into a roadside barrier post. Paul's head snapped forward into an exploding airbag, and darkness. Trip. I was trapped behind somebody else's eyes now. I could feel their thoughts. But this was no ordinary thought stream. It was a dripping fractal of swarming thought streams, all battling for control, like 1,000 tortured minds forcibly melded into one. Eternal anguish, random memories jumped out from a subconscious mess, like a bubbling swamp. Go back one step, you fucking idiot. This was a soul forever damned to an eternity of paralyzed chaos and suffering. This was the intruder. I knew it. I could feel their feet now, pressed against scratchy carpet. They took one step forward, and then another. 7 quick steps downward, until they tumbled into the wall. Silence. And then, as if puppeteered from above, he slid up the wall and rose to standing. And I snapped into another person, walking down my neighborhood street. "We'd sell them to the neighbors," said a familiar voice. "Pine cones. 5 cents apiece." It was Mitch. He looked to his side, and there, about 6 feet away, I stood. Mitch shook his head, and a chill went down his spine. Suddenly, I stood in front of my own front door, looking up at myself. "I've seen enough of those, for a while." Howie's voice echoed as he rubbed his forehead with the back of his thumb. Darkness. I couldn't even think straight. Paul's voice echoed.
"Reading Aiden Code South, going past in Code filming when shot petroleum."
The intruder's voice echoed. Daylight. I stood outside the roadside diner, trapped behind Paul's eyes as he climbed onto a red Kawasaki motorcycle and looked back toward the diner. Through the window, he stared at me. I was sitting in a red booth, sitting with Mitch. Darkness. Now I shuffled through random memories. Upside down, barely breathing, stuck between 2 boulders in the darkness below me, the faintest shape of a person impossibly tucked between the rocks like a coiled-up viper, the glint of dead eyes, darkness, a backyard shed cluttered with junk, bleeding hands frantically wrapping wire around the shattered remnants of a coat rack, darkness, crawling through a tunnel, a dirt ceiling scraping against my back, darkness. "I'm sorry. Oh, God." Paul's voice. I stepped out of a truck. Headlights cut through the night, and freezing rain showered down, red and guts mixed with water on the pavement, and a bloody streak led up the road to a body 50 feet away, crawling. Darkness, the rhythmic thud of a hammer, clanging against nails. I stood at the top of the basement steps, staring at a closet door, paralyzed. Darkness, I stood in an apartment kitchen, staring out through a window toward a brick wall view. Darkness, a hospital bed, in a bedroom, military medical equipment scattered everywhere, strained, wheezing. Darkness, the smell of burnt hair and gasoline. Cold fluorescent light, a charred corpse, laying on a morgue table, mouth wide open. Darkness. A blaring truck horn. Finally, I snapped back to the present. Inches from the front of my car, a semi-truck sped by. I had been parked on the highway shoulder at a 90-degree angle. The sun was rising. I was back in the present, or at least it's what I assumed. I looked at my hands. My hands. I clenched them shut and opened them. Collecting my thoughts, I pulled onto the highway and drove. I had no idea what the fuck just happened. I rubbed my forehead with the back of my thumb.